Priscilla, also known as Prisca, was a first-century Christian woman who, like Lydia, hosted a house church in her home. Unlike Lydia, though, Priscilla is always mentioned with her husband Aquila. The team of Priscilla and Aquila, or Aquila and Priscilla, did great things for Christ, likely hosting house churches in Rome, Corinth, Ephesus, then again in Rome, and then again in Ephesus. Luke introduces Priscilla and her husband to us in Acts 18. We learn that they came from Rome due to Emperor Claudius expelling all the Jews from Rome due to their continual tumults instigated by Carithus. Carithus was a common misspelling of Christ. Paul meets the couple in Corinth as they have a lot in common. Like Paul, they were tent makers, Jewish Christians, and likely already leaders in the church. There is no mention of their conversion, and if Paul did convert them, they would be his first fruits in Greece, not the house of Cephas. Paul stays with them until he leaves for Ephesus, at which time he takes them to Ephesus and leaves them there. Finally, Luke tells us that Apollos came to Ephesus and preached in the synagogue. When our couple hears them, they invite him to their house and explain they weigh God more adequately to him. Luke does not focus on the subject of the teaching. Instead, he highlights the wisdom of Aquila and Priscilla in how they instruct Apollos and the humility of Apollos by his willingness to be taught even though he has a learned man with a thorough knowledge of the scriptures. Critics downplay Priscilla's participation and even point out the private nature of this teaching away from the synagogue. Yet, nowhere do we see Priscilla taking a backseat to her husband, and this private setting of their home was where the church met in Ephesus. Perhaps this was Bible class at the Ephesus Church of Christ. Others overemphasize Priscilla's involvement, citing name order. Priscilla is mentioned ahead of her husband in this passage. This is in a reasonable position as well. Which name is mentioned first? Aquila is mentioned first in Acts 18:2 and 1 Corinthians 16:9. Priscilla is mentioned first in Acts 18:18, Acts 18:19, Acts 18:26, Romans 16:3, and 2 Timothy 4:19. Much discussion revolves around Priscilla being mentioned first 5 times, but it is mostly speculation. What does seem significant is that she is mentioned at all. Other leading men, such as Peter and James in 1 Corinthians 9:5, have wives who are not even mentioned at all in most cases, and never by name. The usual way to introduce a family would be to simply mention the husband by name. If emphasis was needed to show his wife was also present, one would say, and his wife. Mentioning Priscilla by name is no less a significant part from the order. Furthermore, there are textual variants on 2 Timothy where Aquila's name comes first. It seems to me the balance of the naming order really tells the story here. Priscilla and Aquila were a team. They worked together in every aspect of their ministry in which we know about. This strikes me as very similar to Adam and Eve. Perhaps they were just too busy serving to worry about who should be in charge or get the glory. 1 Corinthians 16:19, Paul sends warm greetings from Aquila and Priscilla when writing from Ephesus to Corinth. Apollos is also in Ephesus, but it is not mentioned to the Corinthians, even though he has been in Corinth before as well. Paul also mentions the church that meets in their house, perhaps to share the success the couple had in Ephesus. House churches were the standard organizational structure for the early church. Priscilla and Aquila were experts at running such a church. They did so in Corinth and now in Ephesus, and will soon do the same in Rome. Paul seems to send this couple to cities that require strong local leadership. Romans 16:3-5 gives some strong description of our couple. Only Priscilla and Aquila receive the compliment of being Paul's fellow workers in Acts 16. He uses the same term for Apollos in 1 Corinthians 3:9 and Luke and Mark. It is likely a term that refers to those dedicated to Christ and leading others, believers and unbelievers, to him. Paul also mentions that they risked their lives for him. It is possible that this is a metaphor, but given the trouble Paul had in Ephesus, it could just as likely been real physical danger. The larger influence of our couple is seen in this statement. All the churches of the Gentiles are grateful to them. Finally, we find out that Aquila and Priscilla are now in Rome. They are likely running another house church here and reporting to Paul, which may be why he is so informed on what is happening here. Romans 14 and 15 especially. 2 Timothy 4:19 tells us a little more about our couple, other than they seem to have returned to Ephesus after their stay in Rome. Priscilla and her husband worked closely with Paul, but were also independent church leaders in the first century. Sometimes they followed Paul to a destination, and sometimes they preceded him there. In both cases, they coordinated with Paul and received some of his highest compliments for their leadership. Witherington, Women in the Earliest Church, 1920, page 14, summarizes the activities as follows. One gets the impression they were two of Paul's closest and most reliable workers, and it is likely they were involved in a wide range of activities, from providing hospitality for Paul to church planting to teaching and preaching. Clearly, they were a major factor for the Gentile mission. Priscilla is a remarkable lady and is so knowledgeable in doctrine and well related to her husband that she had a great part in explaining the scriptures, and men did not feel threatened by her. Note that her name is mentioned first. What is implied by Priscilla is that she is humble, learned, and accepted Aquila's headship and authority, not a pushy woman, wise enough to help Apollos privately, so as not to embarrass him or make an issue of her abilities and knowledge, and took up challenges of Christian service. Unlike many modern women who feel independence is an opportunity to be disrespectful or even refusing words of reason, but she had to be teachable in order to be so respected, trusted, and used in ministry. She is also a role model for young women like me who love the Lord and will love to move the church forward, even while many people who are not knowledgeable about the scripture have the belief that a woman has no place in the ministry. She also has a very good relationship with her husband, marked by no competitiveness and a devotion to him and his ministry. Through the gospel expanded to the whole world. I don't know where you are in your walk with the Lord, but believe in him and he will guide and protect you. He will make ways where there is no way. He will take your ministry to a higher level if you just have faith in him and let all the glory belong to the Creator. His track record is taking care of his children is remarkable, and he can even fix anything wrong in your life or your ministry. Oh yes, God can and God will fix it for you. All you need is a faith the size of a mustard seed. Ask Moses at the Red Sea. Yes, God can. Ask Abraham who found a ram in the bush. Yes, God can. Ask the woman with the issue of blood. She will tell you God can. Ask the blind man at the side of the road. He will tell you that God can. Ask Job at the end of his trial. He will tell you God can. Ask David facing a 9-foot 9-inch giant, and he will also tell you God can. Whatever you are going through, God will fix it for you. So aren't you happy God put you here this time to be a woman and a man of God in a sinful world? I hope you and I will have our names among those who will take the Great Commission very seriously. So go now into the world and teach the gospel of Jesus Christ to all you meet. Thank you.